Butler County 911. Where's your emergency?
My name is Kristen King.
All right, Kristen.
My husband was just shot.
This is Kristen King calling 911 after her next-door neighbor, Austin Combs, had come over and shot her husband, Anthony King, in the backyard.
Do you often have problems with him? Has this been an ongoing thing?
He's come over like 4 times confronting my husband because he thought he was a Democrat.
She tells the 911 operator that Austin Combs had come over several times previously and accused her husband of being a Democrat.
I cannot believe this just happened. He is definitely gone. I cannot. He's the love of my life.
This case was among more than 200 instances of political violence that we documented since the January 6th, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump. And what we found is that these cases that we identified are consistent with what many experts say, which is that we are right now in this country in the midst of a prolonged state of political violence. We found 213 cases that we identified as political violence, and that would be violence that was rooted in a partisan or election dispute or attacks that were clearly motivated or committed in service of a political ideology or an ideal. Out of those 213 cases of political violence that we identified, there were 18 incidents that proved fatal, and 39 people died in those cases. What we found was that when that violence turns deadly, and when you can identify a particular ideology with the person who is alleged to have committed that crime, that more often than not, those are people who had sort of right-wing ideologies. Now, we also documented many cases of what we call property violence. So that would be the kind of violence where you would see shattered storefronts, rocks through windows, burned cars, and that kind of violence is more often associated with the left. So you've got this kind of fatal violence, which seems to be more likely to be perpetrated by people on the right, and then you've got this sort of substantial property violence, and that tends to be perpetrated more by people on the left. Austin himself was a very sort of conservative, kind of politically right-leaning person. He was, by his lawyers' accounts, a mentally troubled young man. He had spoken at the bar about being upset because he thought that his neighbor was a Democrat. In fact, his neighbor wasn't a Democrat, but he was worked up about that. We are in this incredibly divisive period right now, where you have political opponents who are no longer just divided by their positions on particular issues. Now you have people in each party sort of demonizing the other, characterizing them as enemies of the people, as traitors against the country. And we especially saw a lot of this around the 2020 election. But even since the election, many people thought that things would sort of cool down. But what we've seen is that, there's still a substantial amount of political violence going on. And a lot of it is sort of morphed over into these sort of hot button political and cultural issues.